So welcome to Floreo for SLPs. I'm Heather. I'm Floreo's Director of Customer Success, and joining me is my colleague Rita Solórzano. She is Floreo's Director of Applied Digital Therapy, and she's also a speech language pathologist with over 30 years of experience in the field. She's going to tell you a little bit more about yourself, and she's also going to tell you about using Floreo in your SLP sessions. So Rita, take the reins and take it from here.
Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for joining. Welcome. I'm going to share my screen and start with the slides. There we go. All right. So this Floreo webinar is especially designed for people who are interested in how VR can be incorporated into speech and language therapy sessions. This is a topic I've been excited about since Floreo's inception. Let's see if we can, there we go. Okay, so today I'm going to provide some examples of treatment goals and how those goals can be addressed using Floreo, and explain how this very powerful tool can be used in the hands of an SLP. The webinar is well suited to speech language pathologists and SLPAs who may be interested in using VR in their sessions. The webinar is not intended to be all inclusive, but rather a first look at how this content can be used in this particular setting. In the case there are folks who are on the call who are not SLPs, I'm going to do a very brief overview of what our profession might cover. And if there are folks here who are unfamiliar with Floreo system, I'm going to give a very brief description of how it works too. So in the webinar, the person who wears the VR headset may be referred to as the client, the student, the child, the individual, or the learner. So SLPs get referrals throughout a client's lifetime. So referrals can start at birth and go through school age, and for folks who might have many of these needs. Related diagnoses that are often referred to SLPs would include these, again, starting at birth. They may be developmental in nature, or they may be something that comes about by disease or trauma. But for simplicity's sake, it's often said that a speech language pathologist covers anything that has to do with listening, talking, reading, or writing. As I was developing this webinar, there was so much content to tackle with those four categories. So today we're just going to look at the language comprehension area, listening, and reading. So imagine you could transport your student to an entirely new environment where there are communicative temptations. Shout out to Barry Prezant for that term. You could transport them to a classroom, or a grocery store, or a playground, or a safari, but you could also see what the student is seeing, and you can control much of the environment as well. So here we have a girl who's immersed in the VR world. While the therapist sees what she's seeing on the iPad, the therapist can help guide the girl through the lesson and use the buttons on the iPad to manipulate the environment. The Floreo lessons were designed with a clinical person in mind who would know how to help the client through various stages of social interactions or language activities, daily living skills, emotional regulation routines, etc. We provide information in the banners that are only visible to the person navigating the iPad to support this process. I like to think of Floreo as the ultimate adaptive switch toy, but with content that's applicable to learners of all ages and all developmental levels. So toward that end, I'm going to point out some lessons that are specifically designed for teaching language comprehension skills, as well as some of those hidden opportunities that are embedded in the Floreo lessons. Okay, let's start with listening, because in typical development, we see signs of this first. We'll start with a quick look at the lessons that are for clients who are at very early developmental stages. So responding to a sound source. Here's who made that sound. When the lesson begins, we hear an animal sound, and the learner has to turn to the animal to see a reward. Next, we go to find that sound. Here, the SLP can choose which animal is making the sound. This is another version of the same skill. The first lesson allows for the SLP to let the lesson run and focus the majority of their attention on the client, while the second allows for the coach to pace the lesson and decide which animal will sound next. Okay, let's say you have a client who has difficulty responding to a bid for attention. This can be a bit complicated to try to stage opportunities for these events in the real world. So in Floreo, we build the bid for attention into the related lessons. So one of the characters will say, "Hey," or "over here," when the child isn't looking directly at the character. The main objectives of these lessons vary. Some contain an adult character who is asking for attention, and sometimes a child character is asking for their attention. I want to point out that what the learner is seeing is between the two green lines, and we give the coach a bit more visibility on the iPad. Let's take a look. Here's Emma is pointing. You'll see Emma outside the two green lines, so it's not visible to the learner. Hey! She tries to get the child's attention by calling "hey" before she points to an animal. Next, we have a lesson where Emma is, we want Emma to model a gesture. But first, we need to make sure the child is paying attention.
Over here. Move, please.
And next, we have a child character who is trying to get the learner's attention. Right now, the child is looking at the character, and now the child is not.
Hey, over here. Say, dog.
Okay. All right, so here we have a bid for attention that's more appropriate for a school-age child. This lesson is entirely built around the learner focusing on the teacher when she starts class. So the learner says, the character says, "All right, let's get started." And then the student is asked to focus their attention on the teacher. We give the student a few different opportunities to focus on the teacher, with the in-scene teacher becoming more insistent with her bids for attention. This lesson is called "Get Ready for Class." Now, this program will be recognized by many SLPs. Visualizing and Verbalizing is a program by Nancy Bell and has been around since the 1980s. The program works on developing an individual's concept imagery to improve comprehension. You introduce the strategies by explaining to the child how activating the visual parts of your brain to make a picture of the words you hear can help the child remember and understand more. The full program kit comes with pictures that an SLP would use to coach a child. And the therapist asks the child to describe what they see, and then will coach them to recognize salient elements of the scene, including actors or actions, quantity, etc., which make for a better understanding of the context. This is called the picture-to-picture exchange in the Visualizing and Verbalizing program. So here's an example. We have, if you were using this picture as a stimulus for the picture-to-picture stage, you'd show the student the picture and ask her to describe it. student would benefit from this approach, and a student who would benefit from this approach would be likely to give you a bare bones response like, it's a street. At that point, the therapist would prompt for, okay, what's at the center of the picture? What kind of street is this? What time of day is this? What do you see in the background? How many buildings are there? What mood is the picture? And so on. Now consider using Floreo for the picture-to-picture stage. You set the student in the same street corner where he starts the process, but in this case, he has the entire 360-degree environment to describe. Let's take a look. This lesson is called Check for Risky Cars. Now there's an opportunity to see the movement of the cars, to hear the sounds of the city, see the color of the sky, and so on. This happens all before the start button is tapped on the iPad. And the dynamic nature of the immersive environment parallels real life where you would want the skills to generalize to. It also has an engagement factor that is really appealing to a lot of learners. You could also place the learner in one of the other, the other 3D environments, sorry, there we go. So other scenes that you could use for the picture-to-picture stage, you might use Find the Fish, for example. Here the learner is in the aquarium, and there's quite a bit to describe here as well. The swaying seaweed, the bubbles floating up, etc. The fish swimming by. Move us ahead. Here's the Floreo lobby. There's also a lot to describe here. The time of day, the mood, as well as the signage, the fireplace, and the koi pond. Here we have Watch the Train. If your student is having trouble with spatial terms, you could introduce spatial concepts. Where is the train? And so various objects could be targeted. You could look at vocabulary retention, and you could also look at strengthening your student's semantic mapping here. Okay, so one tool that you can add to your therapy session comes built into the iPad. On the iPad itself, you can video capture the screen, and you could record the VR session that you're having with your learner and then review the entire session that the student just completed. You can pause the video. You can take still pictures from the iPad to show the learner where the salient features are in the environment so they can recognize it the next time the lesson is introduced. This is a great way to build on vocabulary targets from the scene that you're working on. And if you need help figuring out how to do this, go ahead and put a question in the chat, and we can forward you a link to instructions or to a YouTube video to show you how to capture the videos from the iPad. You can also now capture ambient sound in the environment if you want to record what the students' verbal responses were while they were in VR. So the Listen and Find series are a series of 5 lessons that require the learner to listen to a direction, wait for the whole direction, and then find the character being described. This is Listen and Find One Animal by Name.
When I say go, find the child. Go. Hi there.
Now, Watch what happens when if the learner begins to look before the character says go.
When I say go, find the parrot. Don't start looking until I say go. When I say go, find the chimp. Go.
So here we have listen and find two animals by feature. These lessons build upon each other, and so this is the fifth one in the series, and it asks for the learner to listen to the full description of two different animals or characters, hold it in his working memory, auditory working memory, and then find the animals based on the description.
When I say go, look at the animal that is gray. Then, find the animal that has a beak. Go.
Gray animal, beak animal. We have quite a few videos, I think we're up to 16 now, that present a learner with a 3 to 4 minute voiceover explaining some element of nature or wildlife. You can find these lessons under Responding to Auditory Information skill category. Some of these lessons focus on a single animal, such as a lion or a lemur, and others are more general. For example, here we have Arcadia.
Welcome to the magical world beneath the ocean surface, where a whole new universe of creatures awaits. Fish like these like to swim together in big groups called schools to stay safe from bigger fish who might want to eat them. Schools of fish move together in patterns almost like a dance.
So as relaxing as that is, I'm going to pause it for a second. So these lessons could be played for the client, and then the client can be presented with listening comprehension questions based on what they heard via the voiceover. All right, let's move on to reading. I'm going to start by covering some embedded word and phrasing reading opportunities. Some of these are critical elements of the lessons. Others are simply opportunities to look for text in the environment. Also, I'm going to talk about incorporating a second student into the experience and give them some reading practice. And these opportunities may be very helpful when working with reluctant readers. For reading signs in the environment, look to a pool party. We're going to actually take these one at a time. The signs are read and explained to the learner by a character that approaches. Here she comes. And the audio on this is really, really low. I apologize, but you can see the banners in the text in the banners. So simple phrase reading here. Let's move on to the bus lessons. Oops, sorry. So here, the bus lessons begin with the map where you can read the destinations where the bus goes. You can also read the street signs, the ones that say downtown. And on the other side, we've got uptown. Then we move on to the schedule, and the learner needs to find their destination on the schedule, not to mention following the schedule and figuring out which bus they need to take. We have some simple reading in the spatial concepts lessons. Here we have up and down with some support from a voiceover in the scene.
Down. Up.
In the school environments, we have incidental reading opportunities. So here we are at the doorway of a classroom where we see books with titles on them. We have a recycling poster. An exit sign out the door. And the classroom rules. Now, Magic Mix is a turn-taking lesson, but all the children in the scene have name tags, and each child has a different magic ingredient. So there are opportunities for reading there. If you use this in a group setting, you might have one child wearing the goggles, while another child who's watching from the iPad reads the banners and the text on the buttons in order to make a choice. Orienting to the grocery store has quite a bit of signage. Signage for each aisle, for each section. Here again, one student could wear the goggles for a particular section, and another student could help navigate the lesson using the text on the iPad. It's a very large grocery store. Okay, here in another part of the store, we have scan the store shelves. So we place a shopping list in front of the student, and she has to find the item on the shelf. So here the learner is looking for lemonade, looking on both up and down, high shelves, low shelves, both to the child's left and to the right. Once the child finds the lemonade, it disappears from the shelf and reappears in the grocery cart. And one more example, one of the time management lessons where the student is behind the concession stand at the movie theater. They need to follow the list and find the items or machines to activate. In another of these lessons, customers will approach the student with a question, and the student provides information based on the signs they see in the theater, like the restrooms or which number theater the customer is looking for. Okay, so many of the students we work with struggle with the ability to interpret the context of narrative texts. Written narrative text often conveys complex emotions. So think of a sentence like, "I'm fine," he screamed, or "The food is terrible here and the portions are so small." Students who struggle with reading comprehension need time to process the underlying meaning in order to recognize someone's mood and understanding contradictions in dialogue or events. So Floreo's lessons allow you to pause a social interaction in the moment and explain to the student what is going on. If you're working with learners who often miss elements of narrative text, this activity may be a bridge to help them develop this understanding. So let's compare the mood of these 3 students.
All right, no homework tonight.
This is student number 1. Student 2.
I wish we had some extra time to get our books together. What are you doing here?
So context is everything here. In VR, the student can see the character's body language, hear their voice tone, and they stay immersed in the interaction as long as is needed for them to gain an understanding of who might be in a good mood and looking forward to something, who might be having a slight snag in their day, and who might be in a very bad mood. And once the student is more easily able to recognize these subtleties while they're in the interaction, you can help them transfer that skill to the context of a written narrative.
All right, no homework tonight.
She's very excited. All right, so since reading begins as a sound-based skill, these skills can be practiced in all sorts of activities and games. So go into Winter Look and Find, for example, and when Emma, that character, looks at a particular object, ask the learner to identify the beginning sound of a word or the ending sound of the word. You could do the same in the grocery store. Use Be a Copy Hero and turn down the sound and then use it as a blending, segmenting, or phoneme manipulation drill. I'm going to show you how I did it. Now, this is way out of the box, but just as an example of how you could use Floreo to engage the student with some of these rudimentary tasks, you would need to be well acquainted with how the lesson typically works so you could adapt it to the way, to use it the way you want to. You would use one of these lessons where there's a simple functionality to deliver a reward animation. You'd need to turn down the sound on the learner device with the task that you're asking them to do. And here's an example of a blending task. So you'll hear my voice as the voice of the therapist and a computer-generated voice as the voice of the client. In this case, ignore the banners. Remember, I'm using this just as a way to engage the learner in a task that I'm asking him to complete. Okay, what word am I saying? It.
Split.
Well done. And deliver the reward. So, here's an example of a phoneme manipulation task. Now, say the word split, but don't say the ul sound.
Spit.
Very good. That was it. All right, so Floreo is a very highly versatile tool. The lessons have been designed to allow almost anyone to operate as a coach. But one of the things we like to point out is that experience counts when it comes to tool use. So consider it a cello. If you put this instrument in my hands, you'll get a sound. Some might call it music, some might not. But if you put that same tool in Yo-Yo Ma's hands, you're going to get a much different, a much better result. Similarly, if you put Floreo in the hands of an SLP, she will find all sorts of communication opportunities. In short, the experience that the coach comes with can influence the learning opportunities that can be found. So this is just a sprinkling of ideas on how Floreo can be incorporated into a speech and language setting. I'd love to field any questions that folks might have, and or comments are welcome too.
So just a quick reminder that we are going to take questions in the Q&A, and we do have a couple that I'm going to read off now. But if you have some burning questions that you want to ask Rita, we are happy to field those as well. So Rita, the first question here in the Q&A is, how do you record the audio of the learner's responses from a lesson?
That's great. So I can, if you share your contact information with me, I'd be happy to send you a link, and please let me know if you'd prefer written instructions or a YouTube instruction.
So I'm just gonna say one thing. Please don't put your contact information in the Q&A because it will be public for everyone in the call. I think a better way of getting that would be to email support@floreovr.com, and we'll connect you directly with Rita if you have questions that require her expertise. Sorry, Rita, keep going.
No, that's okay. That's great. That's great. Yeah, the iPad, Apple keeps coming up with new features that we're finding can be really helpful for running Floreo.
And another question in the Q&A right now, what are the opportunities for high school students who are non-diploma track focusing on life skills and communication for independent living?
Good question. We have a number of lessons that focus on transitioning youth. You'll find those mostly in the community and daily living section. So you will find the grocery store lessons. There's one that's orienting to the grocery store. There's one that is, you saw the scanning the store shelves. There are work-based lessons that are placed in the grocery store as that involve communicating with team members. You will also find lessons in the movie theater that involve time management. There are lessons that involve answering questions posed by a police officer. Thank you for sharing that, Heather. The street crossing lessons may or may not be applicable to those transitioning youth, but it certainly doesn't hurt to try those with those particular learners. And I'm trying to think what else we have.
Did you mention the new AI characters yet?
No, I didn't. Thank you. I built this webinar before those came out. We do have these wonderful, this wonderful new functionality that we've just launched, and it's an AI conversation with the character, and the character will respond to both questions and comments that is made by the learner. You can choose whether you want to talk to Jordan or talk to Marcy, and we have put some guardrails on those conversations. So for example, if you bring up a fist fight, they won't be able to talk about that. So they're clean conversations.
And if you didn't see where I navigated to when I started screen sharing this, you can review our lesson library just like I'm screen sharing right now. If you visit floreovr.com, up at the top, you'll see a bar in which you can use to access Floreo's lesson library. And when you navigate to the lesson library, if you tap on any of the lessons, you'll see that it pulls up a larger description of that lesson. Hopefully that was coming through on my screen share there. And in some cases, like this new security savvy lesson, you'll see kind of a little preview video of that lesson. So it's kind of a fun way to get to know the Floreo lesson library. You can read that longer description. You can see which lessons might be most applicable to your learners. And certainly, I know Rita is always happy to talk about particular learners and particular lessons for Floreo. So please do feel free to reach out to us anytime, and we'll connect you with Rita with questions. So I think there's
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say there's another question in the Q&A, but if you have something else to say, then go ahead and say it.
I was just going to thank you for pointing out that security savvy one too. That's very cool. Now we can move the learner through the airport security, and there are other travelers that are in the line as well, and you can choose whether or not the learner gets pulled over for extra questioning.
And another question here, will Floreo be continually developing and adding new lessons and AI elements?
Yes, we will. Stay tuned. We try not to promise anything specific because we want to make sure that we're delivering quality lessons. And so, yes, we're diligently working on the AI components of Floreo.
I think that one of the coolest things about the AI characters is you can prime the characters to work on a particular skill with the learner. So as you're setting up that lesson before you hand off the headset to the learner, you can instruct the AI characters to take on a particular persona. So for example, if your learner needs to practice interviewing skills, like responding to interview questions, then you can ask the character to take on the persona of an interviewer and then ask them at the end of the session how the learner did. And they will give you a report back as to how the learner did responding to their interview questions. So there are any number of personas that your AI characters can take on. That is something that's really exciting about those particular new lessons compared with some of the Floreo lessons that don't incorporate AI. But lots of opportunity for creativity, conversational skill development, free-form conversations. So we're pretty jazzed about those and can't wait to hear what people think about them. So Rita, no one's asked this, but I'm dying to know, what's your favorite Floreo lesson?
Oh, it keeps changing. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to say. I mean, the new ones are so phenomenal, and it's difficult for us to estimate how many lessons we have, because when we started, we were building single targeted behaviors in a particular lesson, and that still can be helpful for learners who need just a very short time in VR, and they can get a lot of benefit from that. But then when you talk about the conversation corner lessons with the AI, it becomes exponential. We can't really estimate, how many learning objectives can be found in that particular lesson, just because it's impossible to count.
So I'm going to put a last call for questions in the Q&A. So if you're frantically typing, please keep typing. We'll wait another moment or two. And while we're waiting for you to type your questions in, quick reminder that you can contact us anytime, support@floreovr.com. If we can't answer your questions directly, then we will connect you with Rita or another member of our team who can. If you haven't yet subscribed to Floreo and you want to, that is also a great place to email. We'll connect you with a member of our sales team who can help you find the best subscription and pricing information for your particular circumstances. And if there are other webinars or events that you'd like to see, then please reach out to us. We try to host these at least monthly, and we want to provide topics and interesting content that you would be interested in. So if you have suggestions or ideas for webinars or lessons or anything related to Floreo, then please email those to us too. Looks
Can
like
I also
yeah, go ahead.
give a little plug? So I'm going to be speaking at ASHA this year on Friday at noon. If anyone's coming to the ASHA conference, please stop by. It's a talk on addressing conversation skills with autistic learners using VR.
So we have another question in the Q&A, and I actually don't know the answer to this. So Rita, maybe you do. Are the roles that the AI characters can take on limited, or can you give a specific directive? For example, can I direct an AI character to make the conversation awkward so the student has to navigate that? So I've played around with these AI characters and I've asked them all sorts of crazy things and had some very interesting conversations with them. That is one thing I haven't tried. So I don't definitively know, but maybe you do, Rita.
I haven't tried that, but I think I will try it and see what happens. They are active in our lessons, so our current library. So if you're able to play around with that, we would love to hear feedback from you about it too.
And they are in beta right now, so we're still tweaking them. We're still going to make some adjustments as well. So that's definitely something that we can share with our content team as an ask. And if it doesn't exist, then maybe it will very soon. Any other questions before we head out of here today? And thank you again, everyone, for taking the time with us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you're located. We always appreciate you taking the time with us. We know you guys are busy people.
Yeah, let me add my thanks to that as well. Really appreciate your attendance.
So I don't see anything else in the Q&A. If you do have a burning question after we end the call here, please do feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to answer your questions about anything related to Floreo. So thank you again, Rita, for taking the time to share your knowledge and your expertise. And thanks everyone for joining us for Floreo for SLPs. Talk to you soon.
Have a great day, everyone.